All right. So if it's okay, have a couple of updates, and then I will, we can work on our report. I have a couple of specific areas I wanted to talk through, and then if anyone has feedback on other areas, love to hear that. That agenda work for you, Chair, so we can get to talk before the section.
Yep, sounds good to me. Thank you.
All right, cool.
Yes.
So I think one exciting piece of information, and I will pull it up, is some folks who I think a couple of you have met before, Denise Shakurjian and Chris, and a few others have started AIvermont.org, which is an organization focused on AI literacy. They are still kind of in early stages of getting that moving, but I'll throw it on screen. They are focused on AI literacy specifically through the K-12 system. And they are pulling together a conference for either late this spring or early this summer for educators on how they can effectively incorporate, well, it says right there, integrate AI effectively into their classrooms. So at a future meeting, I'd love to have them come talk about their progress and give us an update, but just wanted to give you all a heads up. I think, John, you might be involved in that a little bit too.
Just peripherally, I've talked to both of them about it, but I do definitely think that an alignment here would be great.
Yeah, and I think Phil, I want to like tap you too and be like, hey, you've been doing this for a little bit. Share some wisdom. So
that'd be great. Oh,
I'm glad to be involved.
Yeah, I think that would be great. All of us.
Yep. All right. So that's the main update I have. So with that, I will, unless there's any other news for the rest of the group or coordination that we should be doing amongst ourselves. Okay. So here's where we're at. I've been working on this document. I've sent around another draft. I think it was early yesterday, and it's getting there. I think we're really close. There were a couple of specific areas where we had put pins in to circle back around, and I wanted to make sure that we were doing that. And then I'll have a final draft over to you probably next week. But okay, so here's where I wanted to dive in. This is in the section, it's like general requirements for AI systems section, or for automated systems. And what we were supposed to be doing is talking about, what are the operational requirements for deploying and operating automated systems in general. We'd done a bunch of work on auditability and testing and monitoring procedures, and talked about the distinction between systems that are learning continuously and systems that are learning in batches and like being redeployed in a new version, and systems that are kind of hybrids that go back and forth, and what testing looks like in each of those. I have some work to do with Susanna. Susanna and I were supposed to be looking at what does impact assessment look like. So we'll each be taking a run at drafts of this. Okay, which brings us to now that it's been tested, now that we've got a thing that's running, what do we need to do if the system is being used by another entity, like not the one that initially kind of bought or is running the system? So we had found 3 areas that we wanted to dive into. One was, do we have specific requirements for things that are public facing, like the AI interfaces being used by the public? I think a lot of the kind of chatbot models are like the current wave of that, but also recommendation engines. And I'm sure there will be other tools in the future. What are the requirements we have around those? Particular considerations for systems that are developed for one purpose and then have their use case expanded. So we had an example, or I came up with an example, and we can talk through that one in a minute. And then so that's where the use case expands, and then the other possibility is the groups that are using the thing change over time, and do we have any specific requirements around those? So those were three that we had kind of put pins in, and I wanted to circle back to see what we thought. So I want to start with the public facing systems. Do we have any special requirements for public facing systems? I came up with a few. So the first one is that it be easy to use. The next one is that they be designed in a way that makes their output easy to confirm against other resources. That they be monitored continuously to make sure that they're behaving as we expect for a given input, they're actually producing the correct output, and that review cadence be kind of more frequent and more rigorous than our standard. We've already said that you need to monitor things continuously if they're online continuously, but if it's being used by kind of non-skilled operators, I think that becomes a little bit more important. Additionally, like there should be a pilot phase as a standard part of the release of those tools. That they have a report and issue button like built in, and just like a one click, and then maybe a describe your issue, but a kind of quick way for users to flag things. And that we focus this on use cases where AI can be an optional enhancement. So if the automated system goes away at any point, we're still offering the users that capability, even if it's more manual. We're seeing the AI as an optional enhancement, and that getting it wrong is lower impact. If it's something that's not designed to be run by a skilled operator, we need to target it to issues that are lower impact. So those are things that occurred to me, but I'd like to get the council's input on those, and feel free to change, strike, add, whatever you'd like. What are your thoughts? John has his hand up. Thank you, sir.
You're muted, John.
Oops, sorry. What I was wondering is, since this is going to be public facing, should there be a requirement that it's written somewhere when somebody's interacting with the system that there's an AI assistant? There's an AI process behind it?
Great point.
I can't think of anything else at the moment.
Okay. Anything that you would strike or restructure?
If there's an order here, I would put clearly labeled as AI towards the top. What do you think?
Yeah, I
agree,
agree.
John.
Okay. Not hearing anything else. Thank you for that input and feedback, and I'll draft some language here and get this around for review. I'm going to move on, but if anybody thinks of something, we can always come back to it. So systems that are developed for one purpose and then have their use case expanded or grown. And I came up with a hypothetical example here just to characterize that. So if we had a recommendation system that was supposed to connect Vermonters to human services type programs, and it was working, during a natural disaster, we had the brilliant idea of cloning it and repurposing it to help business owners connect with community recovery programs. This is the kind of thing that does tend to happen. So when something like that happens, what types of review would we need to do to make sure that is an acceptable expansion of its case? And So there were two that came to mind for me. One was the need to review to ensure there were no surprise community impacts. So basically, I think that's perform the community impact assessment again with the new scope.
I mean, I think my thought would be sort of maybe encapsulated in the next one, which is really tied to like what, the data that was used to train the original AI. Is that, something that can be shared or consumable for the, like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to repurpose an AI. My presumption is that basically the AI is going to be the AI that's was up and running for the other purpose, and then it's going to be given tasks related to the new purpose. So there is question whether or not the new purpose should have access to the data and everything else the same way as the old. I guess that's kind of fit for purpose question that you were talking about, but I was just thinking more in terms of the data and data policy.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a consideration, right? I don't think there's an answer that we will have at this, like from here, but when they're considering the expansion, that's something that needs to be thought through.
Yeah.
Okay, those are great.
John's hand's back up.
I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but how would you address a privacy issue, kind of going back to like the differential privacy issue that we sort of parking lotted? If you had, I'm trying to think of a use case, but could you have an application in one space which wouldn't reveal anything private, but the same data in another use could reveal something that I'm trying to think of an example, but that the worry I have is that by combining information in another application, you could deduce information that was never meant to be, like correlating someone's address to income or something. I'm trying to think of a realistic case, but the problem about designing for one purpose is you tend to think about, that how the data is going to be accessed. When somebody's using the same data in a different way, they can often find ways of combining data to re-identify something that was de-identified. I don't know, just trying to figure out, maybe there's something about it should be reviewed for privacy, or do you or do we think that if it passed the privacy screening that we were going to do on the initial intent, that it should be sufficient for the subsequent? I think it's a corner case, so maybe it's not worth saying.
I think it's a great point, and I think it's really risk-based, right? So if it was only trained on some sort of human services historical case data, which is fairly sensitive, but the population that was using it, like we had determined that the risk of an attack leaking that information based on the population that was using it was not that high, right? When we then expand this to a new population of users, that may change that calculus like pretty significantly, and potentially the combination of data could also make the impact of it worse.
Yeah, like
Is that where you're going?
Yeah, let's say you had like a child protective services and you knew that there was some sort of, issues at home and a family, and then law enforcement used that and sort of preemptively said, there was a crime in this area, I'm going to go after this, this person. Does that violate privacy? In other words, would the fact that there was, social services involved, should that be known to the police in any case?
Not through a system like this anyway, right? So yeah, that's a good point.
That's just an example of I mean, it needs to, if that data is already shared, then it should be fine. But if you unintentionally uncover information that's used in one case, can it be used in another case? Like, I think that example might be a good one to think about.
Any other considerations on this? The use case has changed.
If there's a consent process associated, then that consent has to be kind of carried forward and reestablished, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Like
so
even if, what's
yeah,
that?
Again, thinking about the underlying data. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I think you got it.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to, and we've kind of covered both of these, so I copied some of the things down. A system built for one group expanded to use for others. In this case, the system and purpose isn't changing. We're just adding an additional batch of users to it. So in this case, we added a group of external entities to using like contracted staff, kind of doing business on behalf of the state, to a system that we had already built. They're using it the same way, but what additional constraints do we have there? And I'm not sure where this gray line came from, and I will figure out how to get rid of it eventually. But in this case, training was one we had highlighted before as being a big one. We need to make sure the new users are adequately trained. As a part of that, a closely monitored pilot to ensure that the inputs and outputs are of the expected quality. So if the quality has gone down with the new user base on the data entry side, that could have unexpected outcomes. And then does the change of user base create new potential issues regarding privacy or risk? And then there could be a consent piece again. Are there other pieces? We're using the system for the same purpose, but onboarding a larger population of users to it.
My only comment would be based upon where I spent the week. The addition of groups of individuals that participate in the activity might have a different, for lack of a better term, need to know or access to the information derived. So people from inside the government have signed non-disclosure agreements. You make that available to external people, then you can't release that same set of data. That would be, but you might have that issues regarding privacy risk up above, Josiah.
I'll combine them because I think they're closely related, but it's a different color for sure. Okay. Well, again, we can come back to this.
I don't
Oh,
just to jump on for a second. I guess validation of the model to the purpose and use as you add additional groups. Do they use the data or the output in the same way for the same purpose? And maybe I'm just beating on the same thing the same way.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to jump down. All right, explainability. So we've done some work on explainability. We said that the explanation of how a decision was taken should be provided in terms that are understandable to a layperson following a standard format. what I thought would be useful to do, so these were the items that we had come up with, the name of, here, and I'm going to make these bulleted so that we can differentiate them. A bulleted list here of the name of the decision, the inputs that were being used to make the decision, a summary of the decision-making approach, being explicit about how it was applied in this particular case, and then the role of human oversight in the decision-making process. So I was trying to kind of do a worked example so that we could react to it and adjust as needed. So I made up this hypothetical program that I'm pretty confident doesn't exist, that offers, let's say, half price driver's license renewal if you're below a certain income and you're driving efficient car. So there's a program that, to be clear, I don't believe exists, but you have to be driving an efficient car and you have to have an income level below a certain threshold. So this is an example of the type of thing you could get back. So in this case, the person was driving a 97 Windstar, which doesn't meet the program criteria because it's not an efficient vehicle. So top part of this, I don't think matters so much. The part that we wanted to standardize is this lower half, which would become kind of almost the nutrition facts on decisions made by automated processes. So an explanation of automated decision on your eligibility for the reduced cost license program. The decision restated, your application was denied. The reason, your vehicle does not meet the program criteria. These two are basically a restatement of what hopefully is included somewhere else in the notification. The information we used in making the decision, your current and previous applications for a license, and details about your vehicle. You can learn more about the process, and there's a link. So we're specific about the data that's being used, types of data that are being used anyway, and then guidance to learn more about how that information is used. Then how we made the decision. This is the intended to fulfill the requirement of, like, specific to this case. An automated process reviewed your vehicle's VIN and found that it did not meet the criteria. I should change this. Okay. A staff person reviewed the results and confirmed that a 97 Windstar is ineligible. The appeal process, if any of the information above is incorrect or you wish to appeal for any other reason, link. And I know we had received some comments from, I think, Jay previously that we needed to be careful about making appeal processes accessible. I don't know that we've put any requirements around the appeal process specifically yet. I think it's worth calling that out in our recommendations. But basically, high level what the appeal process is.
Can you scroll back up to the original, for example, under, so.
Oh,
did
this stuff here?
Yeah, so, so I think this is accurate as far as like applying explainability to a decision, but I also think there's an element of explainability that needs to go to the AI, its purpose, how it's going to do its work, and what it's not going to do, right? So there's and maybe that's already in, maybe that's in there and I'm just forgetting it, but.
We had covered that elsewhere. So we had said that when we implement a system, we need to have description, data sources, capabilities, like all the things, right?
Yep.
This is like the part that gets attached to the decision.
Gotcha.
Time.
Yep, got it. Yep, that makes total sense. Yeah, I mean, I could dig what this was trying to do. I just wanted to make sure we had the other covered sufficiently, and we do. Okay, good.
I hope so. Well, you can review the draft language next week and confirm.
Okay.
So is this like the right level of detail? Is this a good model? If this was you being denied, automatically rejected in some way or automatically approved, would this be an appropriate level of detail to receive?
I mean, I think yes, but maybe add a little bit. Like when it says your current Okay, hold on here. For license and diesel, okay. It said an automated decision reviewed your vehicle's VIN and found that the vehicle did not meet the criteria. And then I think that not meet the criteria is kind of vague, right? And not as a specific example, like just saying, maybe we need to provide some like example, da 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 da, so they know what you mean by things like words like that, right? They're going to be different in each case. I understand that, but like, let's not let ourselves get away with just saying it doesn't meet the example. Let's find some way of starting to give some examples of those things so that when people, if they do need to call and ask questions, they're gonna say, you know, they got some context, I guess.
Okay. Getting at least 45 mpg.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, yep. And you could do it as an example, blah, 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 you know.
If you're calling in, though, you're going to want the specific cause, right?
Well, yeah, and then they may be able to get to that, but I think just leaving it at it doesn't meet the criteria. They're just going to be calling and be like, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about. What criteria? What kinds of things could be criteria? Blah, 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 you know.
Right. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. What about, and this is something I wanted your input on specifically, Mark. What if we're denying it because your application looked fraudulent? I know we tend to be careful about how we say those words, right? So trying to balance like sometimes we can get really specific and it's okay, and sometimes we want to be more general because we're concerned about the security of our process and not showing how we're securing them.
Yeah, that one's touchy because that's not really like, basically that's one of those ones that should get flagged in my mind, right? Like we should be building a system that's trying to auto adjudicate it for, you know, the yes or no's or approvals or disapprovals based upon the criteria. But if there's something that's happening outside that gives us fear that it could be risk, then it should be kind of a flag status. So I would just, you know, maybe put something in there saying that, you know, your application has been flagged, you know, for further, you know, review or something like that, instead of indicating that, you know, due to suspicion of fraud as a worst case type response, you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We don't want to, those are the words we don't want to say.
Right. John's hands up. Sorry, John.
Just to the same point is you don't want to accuse somebody of fraud until you're sure. And along the lines of what you said is if you sort of triggered a second level review, could you delay that? Could you say, you know, pending review? And in other words, don't tell them that, hey, this looks fraudulent, we're looking into it. Because it could be really an honest thing. It could be a mistake, but it would trigger a human, whatever they would do now is somebody would kind of dig behind it, maybe contact them, but just not give an answer, but don't accuse them outright of fraud. On the other hand, having it flagged instantly if somebody does have bad intent kind of says we're watching you, but it seems to me you don't want to accuse like you said, you don't want to accuse anybody if they might be innocent.
Right. Or yeah. So I like your suggestion of, you know, queued for further review or something like that along those lines.
So I'm hearing that this is generally like the right flavor of information to give somebody about how an automated decision was made. We had specifically said that we don't want to use automated decisions for automated rejections, right? We wanted to do that potentially through a recommendation engine, right? Like you can automatically say yes, but you shouldn't automatically say no. And I tried to highlight that example here. That this was a no from the recommendation engine, but then a staff person was the one who made the final decision.
Yeah.
How do we feel about including this example in the report? Or is
Yeah.
like the, yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be included as just a for instance. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on explainability? I guess decision level explainability. Let me characterize it that way because we covered explainability up above as well.
Yeah.
I think this is really exciting because I haven't seen anybody doing this in a systematic way today. So this will be a good standard for others to react to. All right, go ahead.
I was just curious in that when you say what others, do you mean others in the government or other states?
Other states.
I sent you an article. You probably all saw it, but there was a study showing there were like 12 states doing the same thing. Do we have any sense of what they're doing in these particular cases? Are you?
The states that I've talked to aren't this far yet. Yeah, and I think all 12 of those I've talked to in the last couple of months.
I was just
so
going to say they are all like, Josiah, tell us what to do.
Yeah. I wasn't going to be that blunt, Mark, but yes. So I'm excited for, like, once we get this out, to get feedback from them and have other states look at it and provide their input as well. But I think this is simple. This seems achievable, and I think it's a good thing. So thank you all for your work on this, and helping us get to this point. All right. I want to dive into workforce development. Again, we can come back if anything specifically comes to mind on previous sections. I took some of this from previous work by the AI task force. I'm just gonna, and I know this was included in the draft that was sent out earlier this week for review, but just to orient you to it in case you didn't get to read all 15 wonderful pages of this. The workforce development section, I broke into, after our discussion, into a couple of different chunks. One is about AI training, like how we train people to use AI, base level expectations for an AI ready workforce, which I want to kind of come back to some of the specific findings in this. And then through kind of in reverse order, different levels of education. So higher ed curricula. Phil, I'd love your thoughts on this. I took a lot of it from the work that you all did with your Summer of AI, but there's, I think, more that could be done in this section. High school curricula, middle school, and elementary school. If anyone has thoughts on these, I just wanted to, like, provide something that we can start referencing as we're talking in the education space and coordinating with the AIvermont.org folks. And then, okay, and then we go to new roles that will be created by AI based on what we know today. There was a section about this in the AI task force report, which I expanded the roles a little bit. Not much language here, but we can add more if you all want to. And then, so that's new roles, and then upskilling roles that are going to be empowered by AI, and then other sections that we wanted to talk about that I haven't drafted yet. And if somebody wants to put their hand up and take these on, feel free. Reskilling roles that will shrink or change due to AI, and industry and employer preparedness. Things that employers can be doing today or in the next year or so to start getting themselves ready. So that's kind of high level where the workforce section, like how it's evolved, what it's shaped like now. Questions on that? broadly, or any changes or recommendations on that framework?
I will respond to the sections on education by, let's say, close of business Tuesday. I'm sorry, Josiah, I just didn't have the time from when I received it. But I'll get back to you by Tuesday next week.
No problem. Thank you.
Can I ask a general question? Because I haven't
Yeah.
had a chance to look at this either. I was part of the AI task force, and what we wrote up originally had a little bit better balance between the dangers and cautions around AI and the potential. Am I right? Just seeing you scroll through this seems pretty balanced. It talks about the new job types, and the potential positives of AI, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to have this balanced. It's not all evil, and it could be a boon to the state, in terms of jobs. They're green jobs. They could be anywhere. They could, it could be used to help healthcare, et cetera. So I'd like to read it more carefully and get you some comments, but this is encouraging to me.
Yeah, great. If anything, I felt like I wasn't talking enough about the downsides, because we know that there will be some, right?
Yeah, the
But-
legislation did not really take into account any of the positives. It was all
Yeah.
kind of a fear-based instead of, and not as balanced. And I think it was just pragmatization, just trying to make sure they could get a law on the books. But this looks quite good.
So what I wanted to dive into now was the first two sections of this. So kind of the preamble to all of this, right? Significant potential change for Vermont employers, Vermonters, and state employees. Prepare the workforce. The AI Council recommends work in the following areas. Okay. And then there's been lots of studies of the impact of AI and automation on various roles. 3 trends that we expect to have a pervasive impact. So basically, these are how we want to frame how people are thinking about how AI is going to impact their workforce. And this is based on our previous discussion, but I wanted to wordsmith with you all and make sure that this looked good. And I'll get rid of the highlighting so you can read it. Increased human and machine collaboration being the first one. The second one, a general shift in human work toward reacting to complex situations or work that requires some sort of flexibility. And I tried to frame these all human-centric because I think that's the right way. And then generally a decrease in the number of decisions being made by humans. Those are kind of the 3 big things. I don't think they're very well worded yet. Those were ones that from our previous conversation stood out to me. Would you change, strike, replace? Like, what are your thoughts? And I'll admit.
Oh, go ahead. If somebody
No,
else.
go ahead.
Oh, what is the intent of this? I
Sorry.
mean, oh, go ahead, Phil.
No, I hung myself up when I tried to look at the screen, so I'm back.
Welcome back. So the intent here, and maybe it doesn't belong here. My thought though was that we should frame the discussion about training and education by talking about what are the general trends we expect to see broadly across the workforce. That's where I was trying to go with this.
There's a part of, if you put on rose-colored glasses, one of the things that makes AI very potentially very powerful in places like medicine or law is that anyone has access to almost everyone's knowledge, if you train one of these models. So it can sort of upskill people if it's used in the proper way. So given all the guard bands that we hope to be putting on it, I think a trend from a human-centric thing is the upskilling, the putting more expertise at the hands of humans. You know what I'm saying? Like ChatGPT it's not writing your term paper, but it's helping you organize an argument, is actually increasing your skill. And is not, but in the extreme, you can misuse it. The ability to look at, radiographs of, potential cancer lesions or something like that, and have the knowledge of the models. Those models are now as good as the best, radiologist, and so that skill could be put into the hands of people who may not have as much background. That could be dangerous, of course, if it's mishandled and there's not a human in the loop. But on the other hand, it's, the potential for upskilling everybody, has great societal benefits as well as dangers. So where would you put that?
In the middle of it. That's a really good one. Just gonna go with this.
Yeah, I think it's increasing their abilities and efficiencies,
Yeah, I think
subject
it's-
to all the concerns that we've been discussing.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was starting to think out loud, and that's always a problem when I do that. So I'm going to stop.
Does someone else have their
So
hand
if
up? Oh,
if I think, go, I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, Amanda.
I think the wording of number 4 might be concerning, of a decrease in the number of some decisions made by humans, because it's a little direct, and that's just a suggestion, not just a
Great
thought.
point. Yeah, I didn't like how that one came out, so thank you. Anyone have a recommendation on that one? I think in general, we're seeing the way I want to think about this, again, the rose-colored glasses flavor, is all the decisions that we have to take that are kind of rote and don't require a lot of thought, but draw down on our capacity to make decisions every day. Those ones are going to be less of those. The
Yeah.
more pessimistic is we lose a slice of our agency because we're becoming extensions of the machine, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm trying to strike the
I
balance.
think there's one notion that, like, I think it maybe falls under the efficiency category, but maybe it needs to be given an example to show what we're talking about, because, like, like, say in the security realm or in the data realm, right? Like, you use AI to make vast amounts of data and insights more consumable by humans, right? So that it's not replacing the human decision making in any fashion, but it's, you're taking billions of transactions and applying heuristics and other categorizations automatedly so that the humans can digest that information and make decisions off of. And I think that's probably the most common use of AI today at this point, right? Is in that space. So that's why I was saying it, since it's the most common, it might be the one to kind of call out as an example.
Something like that. Okay, we can wordsmith that. Phil, you were gonna provide some input here somewhere.
In terms of decisions made, well, a couple pieces. When you talk about the shift in human work, I think in addition to flexibility, I might add the words creativity, and or critical thinking, because that's part of the human experience. I agree with the way that number 4 is. What I've heard or seen is talking about removing the rote decisions, therefore reducing the amount of cognitive load to be able to increase the focus on those more non-standard or rule-based decisions that are going to take place. I don't know how to say that, but that's my shot.
I think your point about creativity is interesting too. Should that be part of 3? I think that's where people start to bristle, but It'll never replace human creativity, but it can augment, just like it can augment ability and efficiency. It can augment creativity. Is that a step too far to say? I think that was a kind of an interesting point that we left out.
I like it. I mean, my 8-year-old is able to make greeting cards now, which she would normally not be able to do, right? So yes.
Yeah. Josiah, did you see the ones I sent you? I sent you a group of greeting cards, kind of
Oh,
goofs.
yeah.
Chat GPT,
Yeah.
those were funny. I just thought you'd get a kick out of that.
I have to take a class on how to make prompts because I can't get the pictures out of the automated AI to look like anything that's in my head. So I'm working on that.
All right, so I'll restructure this one. There we go. All right. So in general, like these 4, knowing that I have to restructure 4 to focus differently, I'll get that around for review. But these 4 we think are a good set of trends for people to be thinking about as they're doing workforce preparedness, both like John thinking about companies like the one that you're working with right now, and my peers within state government and other places. Like these are the trends they should be thinking about as they're preparing their workforce.
Agree.
Okay. Trying to think if there was another. Yeah, I'll get input on one other. So this first section, I'd love everyone to do a pretty close read of, because this is, I think, broad AI ready workforce, what we'd like the state to be thinking about workforce development programs that move our workforce in this direction, right? So there's a bunch of words up here that provide some examples that, yeah, I'd love feedback on. But specifically, training and effective human machine collaboration should focus on these areas. So there are 5 here based on our previous conversation that I characterized. Expectations of employees in the context of human machine collaboration, like who's responsible for the outputs, customer service outcomes, things like that. So basically, people should be trained on what the expectations when you're working together with a robot, who has to do what, or who's responsible for the output, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at with this one. So this is responsibility. This one is defining the roles of the human and the machine. I'm going to characterize that as agency for the moment, probably change that later. Identifying or correcting malfunctions or issues in the output, especially being able to identify areas of systemic weakness. Understanding the standard control patterns for AI-enabled machines in their field, and privacy and security considerations of AI use. What I don't like about this is they seem like super technical, but what I'm trying to get at is if you are the person who's responsible for the self-checkout system, which has a slice of AI in it, right? It always gets, I don't know, baguettes by the wrong weight because the scale is not big enough and you have to put it on in a certain way, right? That's the kind of thing that I was trying to get at with this one. It tends to systematically fail in these ways. A workforce that's ready to work with AI should be able to notice those and characterize them and start thinking about how to make that better. Yeah, so that's kind of the context. They ended up being super technical. But anyway, looking for feedback, adjustments, whatever on these 5.
Hearing none.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, hearing none. All right. So I will circulate. You already have this, with the exception of like the blue highlighting in this one. So feel free to like start diving into this workforce section and provide me feedback. We have to take comments during public session, but if you provide me with the feedback, what I'd like to do is probably one more meeting sometime next week, special meeting, for those who can, to get the final cut of this ready for submission. So I'd like to do, if the same time works next week, Friday, and if that doesn't work, we can find another time. I'll stop sharing so I can see everybody. Okay. Seeing one thumbs up for same time and channel next week. Okay. All right, so we'll go with that. I'll
Checking.
okay. Checking. Yeah, John, go ahead.
Just had one question. It's kind of other business when we get to it. So whenever you get to it.
Thumbs up on next Friday at 2.
So we'll do that. Yeah, I guess I'll toss it back over, Mark or Susanna, if one of you wants to take back over chairing for other business and public comment.
Sure, thank you. I guess we'll go do other business, then public comment. So, anybody have any other business that they would? Sure, John's hands up.
Just a question. I might have brought this up before, but do we need some other sort of sideband conversation like a Slack, or are we acting in official public meeting kind of capacity that we're not allowed to do that? I just feel like I don't understand what the information flow that's happening between these meetings. Would it be better to have some sort of a public record way of saying, hey, here's a topic, let's discuss around that?
I think we did ask this from the AGs previously, and I think as long as we were using something that was under like the state's control and we could respond to FOIA requests. However, there's certain things that we can't discuss there because they are subject, they would need to be warned, and like, so certain types of decisions and things like that we wouldn't be able to, but we could, certainly, decide agendas and give inputs to these documents and things like that.
It may not be worth it, if email is working, but for detailed conversations, I don't know how that is working
It's
now.
hard to police. That's the problem, right? Like if we, email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, online editing of documents outside of a meeting has been called out by the Secretary of State's office as a violation, potential violation. So that's a good point. You can always do housekeeping stuff, agendas, all that kind of stuff, administrative things, but when you're, giving inputs on a document, that can be considered a discussion, and you need to do that in an open meeting. So one of the things I suggested to Josiah is provide your inputs, but don't discuss them or go back and forth on them until you're in an open meeting. And then you can talk about the document, make sure that document is, available in all its forms, things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. It does.
Yep. All right.
Okay. Any other new business items to discuss? All right. Not seeing any hands. I guess at this point I'll make a motion, or someone needs to make a motion that we open up for public meeting or public input. Anybody? Somebody?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Okay, so we moved on to the portion, and I don't know how many folks we have who've joined us for public comment, but if you could raise your hand, and then I'll call on you or your number, and then we'd be interested in hearing what you. Yes. Let's see. I got one. Jake Durrell, sir.
Hello. You hearing me?
Yes.
All right.
I sent Josiah just before the meeting, so maybe I probably didn't have a chance to look at it, but I just to incorporate my comments from last time, or I had written up an article, and so I basically took a chunk of that and suggested moving that into the procurement section, creating a. Can you bring that up, or should I can bring it up, or whatever you prefer, Josiah?
If you want to bring it up quickly so it's in the record, and then we'll circulate it, and
Okay.
we can provide comments on it with the rest of the document.
All right. It's not letting me. Only meeting. Oh, I can't share. Can you let me share?
Maybe.
No share for you.
Oh,
Yes, you can share at the moment, I believe.
okay. Matt, a second. So I took my suggestion was to take we're under procurement standards, and I took the code of ethics section because I thought that was also part of kind of the same thing about value alignment, and I provide sort of a definition of value alignment. Saying that we should, as I was saying last time, try and ensure that the folks that are working on AI tools are, carrying out state objectives properly. So I had a bullet point list, which I incorporated into here, saying that these are, not a mandatory set of things, and a lot of vendors won't have these, but things that are should at least be considered in the procurement process as we look at vendors. And by just saying that we're considering them, it incentivizes them to try and speak to some of these elements, whether it's whistleblower policies, like when bias is discovered, or just issues that would be concerning the state, whether during or long after a contract is carried out, or just about their internal governance, and whether it's a purely profit-driven entity or if it's a benefit corporation or some other sort of hybrid. I think it's a factor that we should be taking into account, and not necessarily dispositive of a bid decision, but to consider. So it's suggesting that we work that in, by basically putting, I have this statement here, this kind of statement or something else, expressing in RFPs or RFIs that we're interested in having the vendor speak to that when they're offering to work on a tool that may use AI in some manner. That's the gist of it, and yeah. So I can, or Josiah has this document, and I'm certainly welcome you to use that language and work it in if you find it appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to circulate it within the team, and then we'll discuss it later. Not during public comment right now, but thank you for your inputs, Mr. Durrell.
Thank you, sir. All right. Bye-bye.
Yep. Anybody else who public comment, question, interest? Matthew.
Hi. We were talking, I don't know, we were at the stage of the 1, 2, 3, 4, and we were talking about impacts and studies on how it's playing out and how it will impact the state. And I was thinking, like, with the context of us never dropping, like, job replacing, or always it's about growth upwards. What happens when we get to the point where we upskill, where a person's job gets replaced and they have nowhere else to go?
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely valid concerns. But I think, we need to bring in, well, first of all, the state employees in Vermont are union employees, and there's a collective bargaining agreement, and I don't know the details of such. And so I don't know what mechanisms would be affected and all that. So I think it is definitely a topic for more in-depth conversation around that point for sure.
I think
And
for the purpose, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would say something similar. So for the purposes of what we're trying to present here, I think we should call it out as a, an item for discussion and in coordination with them in the future.
Yeah, I think that section D, reskilling roles that will shrink or change due to AI, right? I think that's, as the council has thoughts there, that's where those would fit. So. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. Anybody else? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody sticking over with us. So, I think we're looking for a motion to adjourn at this point.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We are, today's meeting on the 5th of January is adjourned. Thank you all. And then Josiah, you want to stop recording?
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks. All
Have a
right.
great weekend, everybody.